Well, thank you guys for joining us here at this last talk of the day. So like Vicki was saying, here at Bayer Crop Science, we are moving from our on-prem E-workbook solution to Polar this year. And it's been a little bit of a long time coming, but we are excited to do this. So for this last presentation of the day, you get two of us. So I am Jennifer Green, and I've been working, this is like my 25th year in the company, so that's kind of, and my background is biochemistry, so those people that showed those macromolecules earlier today, thank you, and egg engineering. And so, but for the last almost 15 years or so, I've been working in record management and capturing the research knowledge for Bayer Crop Science and making sure that it's available not only for intellectual property and patent support, but also for research ongoing, because as we know, research is cyclical and we need to make sure that we maintain that. So I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yep. Thank you. So my name is Yelena. I'm also with Bayer Crop Science. I'm from the regulatory side. My education or my background is in chemistry, but somewhere along the line I started finding that boring, so I started kind of learning a lot of digital skills. And so today I'm much more of a technical person, so I'm embedded in the business, but I wear a lot of different hats, from being a developer to a business analyst to a database manager to ELN template developer. So really my capacity in terms of what's interesting to you guys today is I do a lot of advanced ELN template development, but since my background is predominantly in regulatory, I'm here to speak to you guys today from that perspective.
Okay. So I can't start a presentation for Bayer without just talking a little bit about Bayer. Bayer is a pretty large company. You may have heard of us before. We actually have 3 divisions: crop science, pharmaceuticals, and consumer health. Our pharmaceutical department does a lot of oncology, hematology, and women's health. Our consumer health, you may have heard of some of our products like Flintstones vitamins, Bayer aspirin, and Alka-Seltzer. So please go to your pharmacy and pick some of that up. But Yelena and I are in the crop science division, where we are a global leader in agricultural, sustainable and regenerative agricultural products and solutions. And really they're in quite a variety of categories. So we do have a crop protection, which is kind of a chemistry, seeds and traits, which is genetics and actual seeds. And digital, we have a really large, like kind of big data digital products too. And in order to maintain all this, so I show this slide because, as you can see, the kind of research that has to be done to maintain all of this is very broad, which is also really important for any kind of tools that we use to capture data. In our crop science solutions, as you can see, all of our slides have this health for all, hunger for none, which is our little Bayer tagline that we all really take to heart. And so not only do we have a variety of things that we need to accomplish scientifically and provide our customers, but we also need to do that in a kind way to keep in consideration of people's well-being, their economic well-being, their health well-being, the environment people we live in's well-being, and also maintaining things like soil health and water conservation on the farms. And this is globally, so we have all kinds of different customers. Okay, so why are we here really to talk to you today is to talk about why we're going to Polar. Well, the main reason is that the support is ending for our current solution by the end of the year, which is always good when a vendor like pushes you along. But then it really also helps us make the business case. So we're going to need to do something. So let's look around and see what there is to do and figure out what we're going to do with all this information. I haven't looked recently. So we do have 2 instances. We have a record keeping IP, I'm going to call it the research instance, that is pretty much that. It's kind of a paper to glass thing. And then we have the regulatory instance, which we are going to be combining these in our adventures in Polar. We also need to maintain what we already have. We need to have that broad, agile tool that can be used by anybody in our research areas. And we do have a push anyway for us as a company to move away from anything on-prem to software as a service, which Polar is. That was helpful. We did always ask a bunch of questions about AI, make sure that that's on the pipeline, which we know it is. But some of the other things that were really, really important, and this comes down to that financial piece, it was the less than a year to implement timeline. So when we were talking about really how long it was going to take, and we have 2 instances, and one is regulated, and one is a bunch of crazy researchers who will just do whatever they can, then putting those together, and they IDBS laid out that timeline, and they were like, oh, I'm like, that's not even a year, because I've migrated lots of systems, and anytime I'm here migration, large system, tens of thousands of records, maybe 100,000 records or more, I'm like, oh, that's going to be 2 years and 3 years, and so when you can shorten that timeline by staying with the same vendor, because they already had the tools in place, and that was included, because migration tools are also expensive, that lowered our cost, that lowered the time, which also lowers the cost, and it also helps with people adopting it. So those are some of the big things. Plus, you don't have to rebuild templates and workflows, which is really important for regulatory, and then we don't have to reimagine our access structures. So I'm going to just talk a minute about where we are now. I kind of already said this, so I can go really fast, but we do have still these kind of things we need to be able to integrate, not only with our other applications, but we need to be able to integrate with our security, making sure that people's credentials, align. I don't think I did mention that we started this. So I started this back in 2013. I made everybody turn in their paper notebooks and gave them this. And we still have that need to be able to globally. And when I say globally, our research divisions do go all the way across all the different continents. We have users. So it's a lot in the U.S., but that's an important part of it. So I'm going to let Yelena talk about where we are in regulatory.
Okay, so today in regulatory, we use the on-prem, but we use it quite a bit differently than our colleagues in research, where you essentially said you guys basically use it as kind of a paper on a screen. But where they're focused on discovery, intellectual property, amongst other things, our primary focus in regulatory is compliance. And I know that's not a new topic for today, but just because it's in my notes, I'm going to go through it anyway. So all of our data capture systems, ELN being the chief one of them, has to meet certain base requirements. And at its core, it means it needs to be GLP compliant, it needs to have robust archiving procedures, it needs to have audit trail functionality like versioning, and ELN meets that. But we also leverage more capabilities in ELN. And as far as I'm aware, I think we use the full capabilities, at least of what we have access to. The first of which is templates, or I've heard a lot today, them called spreadsheets, but in our terminology, we always say templates. So all of our processes and teams use templates. They range from very basic ones to very advanced to very, very advanced. Almost too advanced that maybe ELN shouldn't be handling that amount of data processing, but it does anyway. And we also use global templates for common tasks and activities like reagent registration, so that everyone can perform the same common function the exact same way. This gives us a lot of standardization, makes onboarding and training a lot easier. And like I said, in regulatory, we really need to be compliant and to work in a very predictable manner. We also use data persistence. So we've heard this topic come up a lot today as well. So a lot of these templates that I'm mentioning, they also export to measure catalogs, and then we take it a step further to transcribe that into a centralized data warehouse for downstream uses and external teams to use, like document automation. And then lastly is workflows, which I think I've been hearing workflows used in a few different ways, because I know a lot of people here at ELN Polar, but when we use workflows, and maybe it's the same, I don't know, I'm talking about using like workflow-driven sign-offs. So that way we can have these repeatable processes that can be custom to internal teams if people want to sign things in a certain way, but then also standardized for our archiving processes, so we can check a box and send it to the archivist to move it into a different node in ELN. So let's see, what's left on there? 100 regulatory users. So as you can see, between us, we have about 100 regulatory users. I think you guys have about 600. Something like that.
Yeah.
But we've tailored our ELN to meet our specific needs today. So as we're thinking about moving into ELN Polar, we're thinking operationally, we're not expecting too much of a change, because luckily all those templates and all the data and how things are set up right now are theoretically all can happen in the same way with Polar. But we are excited for things like inventory, data view, things like that. But yeah, that's how we use ELN on-prem and regulatory. And I'll pass it back to, okay, I have the remote.
Oh, I got it. I did it. All right. So now it's really time, now that we've decided and we know where we are, to think about the future a little bit. I started listing out all the different things that we think about or need to do or need to really consider. And it was a long list, so I just turned it into this word cloud, which is much prettier to look at. So we have that broad research, and Bayer Crop Science processes a lot of data. So we really need to have like all of our tools to make sure we with all of that broad data, we put a lot of resources into it. If you go to our website, it talks about how much we put into R&D and why we need tools like this. And when I say a lot of data, I mean like millions of points, all the seeds that get planted, all of the plots that get sprayed, and then our huge data, like our data views and our digital tools. And we even have the ability for like the seeds, which is a huge part of our business. The data is tracked from where that seed came from, its parents, where it is planted geographically in this soil, all the weather that has happened wherever that is across all, and then it has to be planted, like the same type of seed or whatever can be planted in different places. Then it's also matched to all of the drone images when the drones get flown over, and then it captures there's data points that are captured in the harvesting time, and when planting, there's like all these little cassettes. So we are talking like millions and millions and millions of data points. But we have a huge data engine and like large data lakes and stuff that all this stuff goes to, but this is not actually where we use IDBS Polar. We actually use IDBS Polar to fill these gaps. We still have the labs with the Excel files and the data science group that has all that need, or the protein science group that has all the needs to bring and the flexibility to characterize their proteins and all this kind of stuff. And they are still just using the ELN as a recording tool. So we're also going to Polar as a pivot point and a reasonable resource entry to get from your SharePoint sites, your data repositories and stuff into more structured data going forward. So let's see. And when we go into production, we're going to have 3 use cases. These are pretty big ones. This was also a driver for our decision and it was all in a good tipping point. These groups had they had a need and they were looking for a solution, and we knew the functionality with the inventory and the workflows and the data backbone of Polar. So these projects that were going to happen anyway, wherever that happened, were able to be brought into Polar. The first one is we have a gene discovery group, and they get their samples, and then they have to characterize microbes, and then they make libraries, and then they make genetic libraries, and they might be turned into proteins, it might be turned into, and then they have to track that. So these 400,000 different samples, and some of them are virtual samples, are going to be put into the inventory, and that is going to be a big win for them. This group is kind of a smaller group. It only has, I know there's 2 people that are working on the project, but maybe only like 4 or 5 total in the whole group. So that's one of the reasons that like a tool like this is good for them, because they can put all this stuff in and not, because they don't have millions and millions of data points and things like that. They don't always have entry to our other larger data systems. Then I know somebody mentioned earlier today about handoff. So we are going to be putting the regulatory and research together. And one of the things that the research is going to do is move their pipeline, their phase transition pipeline tracking from an Excel file to into some kind of workflow, and that will also be able to have, they'll be able to have dashboards and be able to track and see what the risk is, because this is like more early stage development, so there's still like a risk of will it actually make it to a product. And then the protein purification and characterization, that's as a group, they get, here's the protein, and it can be any protein, and characterize it, and so they have to have a really flexible way to collect all that information and then pass that information back to whoever requested it. So they have a good chance of eventually using request also. So.
Okay.
All right.
Back to me.
Yeah, back to you.
Okay, so we've discussed a lot about how regulatory uses ELN today and how research uses it, but now let's talk about how we can improve that transition or that working relationship between us as we transition to Polar. So as the slide illustrates, our product pipeline flows from research and development into regulatory. I know it's not groundbreaking there, but that first key interaction between the two is that handoff. So biotech, and I'm using biotech and the word research interchangeably here, but biotech is in charge of creating all of that data related to the product so that the product can move through, right? So they have all that product level data, and research being the ones that run the studies in order to make these regulatory submissions. They need that data. So that first interaction is the handoff, but that doesn't mean that our interaction ends there. Oftentimes during the regulatory side of this pipeline, we have to quote unquote kind of reach back into research to get some more information, or we need to enlist them to do some sequencing activities for us. So there's also that ongoing partnership that's sometimes predictable, sometimes unpredictable, that we come across. But our challenge today is that our on-premises ELN is siloed. So they have their own instance, we have our own instance, and we don't communicate with each other. So whenever we do have to look back, it's emails, it's tapping on the shoulder essentially, sometimes it's verbal, it's not very standardized or certainly not able to be extracted programmatically or data-wise or anything like that. So this, of course, causes inefficiencies and delays, and so we have a critical opportunity here as we think about our future state with ELN Polar, and how we can bridge that gap, create a seamless flow of data between the two. We still have to think about the risks and concerns with the fact that, my area is very validated under very GLP compliant, and theirs isn't, so there will be some fun challenges to work through, but it's certainly worth it in the end. But yeah, so this is one of the things that will lead us into this next topic, which is our need for an integrated system. This is the foundation for us to meet these broader business needs. with agility. So the first one, as I was just discussing, that need for enterprise integration. This isn't just a technical requirement anymore. It really is the foundational gear that's going to enable us to be able to work together seamlessly. And then that leads into our modernization of lab practices, and not just meaning buying the newest equipment or anything like that, but really getting our stakeholders and ourselves willing to adopt these new digital strategies and tools, whether that's automation or AI-driven data analysis or what have you. And that, of course, feeds into our evolving science and workflows. As our data is becoming more complex, we need to have an agile system that is going to adapt to these new data types and workflows without friction. So really this kind of goes into a cyclical event here. You know, it's not a one-way street. Each of these feeds into each other, feeds off of each other. So we really need to have a system that's going to grow with us over time. And that is what's leading us to our destination, which is IDBS Polar. Let me go ahead and move this slide. Okay, so Polar represents our fundamental shift in this strategy, and actually even more so after I've heard about the talks earlier today with the incorporations and the forward thinking of AI, which I'm pretty excited about. Hopefully we get that, we pay for that. But first, Polar will provide an enhanced data backbone, and so that's really the solution to that need for enterprise integration that I was talking about on the previous slide. And this isn't just between our internal systems, but external systems too, both to Bayer and outside of Bayer. We know the data is the most important thing right now. It fits into our overall data strategy, not just with AI, but just to try to wrangle all these different data domains and definitions and data entities across the whole company that have been siloed for so long. Second, Polar is going to empower us to connect and collaborate, again, with speaking on the integration need between research and regulatory, of course. But we want to create a shared digital environment, and it looks like research is also empowering themselves to open new avenues where regulatory is focused on maybe working more efficiently within the avenues that we already have. And then finally, Polar is designed for future science. So it's a scalable software as a service platform. It's going to be integrated with AI, or at least have those capabilities to be so in the future. And it's thinking about that data piece, which we talked extensively earlier about how that will be the launching pad for any of these new technologies coming out. Okay, that is really all we have for you guys today. This is our contact information. If you have any questions, please.
Yes. Thank you very much. I don't think my mic likes me. It's okay. Oh.
You're getting tired, like we all
Yeah.
are. Thank you very much. Any questions for Jennifer or Yelena? Please. Wait for my.
You know, but always got a question. Always want to learn more. I thought it was really fascinating. I think also the way that you're bringing the two sides of your business together is a real great. It sounds like you're really seizing the opportunity to get even more benefits out of your project. What are the biggest challenges that you've got in terms of bringing and harmonizing those two parts of the businesses together, which are probably used to not working together?
Well, I don't like to think of it as challenges, but opportunities, right? So, I mean, I think that, you know, the research groups and the regulatory groups have different things that they're after, and kind of a little bit of a different culture. So I think that's going to be like bringing that together. But like we really want to go into an end-to-end kind of a thing instead of okay, research, okay, now it's all the way, it's at the phase that it's going to go into regulatory, but have that thought process like starting earlier, and then regulatory the other way, like what do they need from research? So, and yeah, I think, you know, and it's like all the other things, like communication, getting together, talking about it, open-mindedness, all of that kind of stuff. Our company right now has a big cultural shift drive to this, so it's kind of all going together too. So that's also nice. So.